Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you, so let's begin. My name is Joe, and what I heard a nurse say after I said goodbye to my dying wife broke my world apart. 23 years was how long Denise and I had been married before she took her last breath in that hospital room. 23 years of what I thought was love, partnership, and building a life together. 2 beautiful children who were now in college, a house we'd turned into a home, and memories that spanned more than half my life. I thought I knew everything about the woman I'd loved since I was 25 years old, but I was wrong about everything. Denise wasn't my first girlfriend, but she was my first real love. The kind of love that makes you want to be a better person. When I met her, she was 23 and working as a receptionist at a dental office. I was a junior accountant at a small firm, still figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. She was different from other girls I dated. More serious, more mature in some ways. She had this quiet confidence that drew me in. I learned later that she'd just gotten out of a long relationship when we met, fresh from a 3-year relationship with someone named Jeremy. She never talked much about him, just said his name was Jeremy and that it hadn't worked out because they wanted different things. I didn't mind that I wasn't her first love. What mattered was that we found each other, and when we did, everything felt right. We dated for 2 years before I proposed, and she said yes with happiness. We had a small wedding with close family and friends. The early years of our marriage were challenging in normal ways. Learning to live together, figuring out money, dealing with in-laws, and career pressures. Denise could be cold sometimes, especially when she was stressed or upset about something. She had this way of shutting down emotionally that used to worry me, but I learned that if I gave her space, she'd eventually open up and we'd work through whatever was bothering her. When Denise got pregnant, everything changed in the best possible way. Denise glowed during pregnancy, happier and more affectionate than I'd ever seen her. She threw herself into preparing for motherhood. Sophia and Carl were born healthy. Sophia had Denise's dark hair and what everyone said were my eyes. Carl looked more like Denise, but had my stubborn personality from day one. Watching Denise with our babies was like seeing a completely different side of her. She was patient and gentle to them in a way that made me love her even more. Those early parenting years were exhausting but wonderful. Denise quit her job to stay home with the kids, which we could barely afford on my salary, but we made it work. She was an incredible mother, the kind who remembered every milestone, organized elaborate birthday parties, and volunteered at school events. The kids adored her, and she seemed to live for them. As the years went by, our marriage settled into a comfortable routine. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but I learned to read her moods and give her the space she needed. She wasn't the most affectionate person, but she showed love in other ways, making my favorite meals, remembering important dates, and supporting my career when I decided to start my own accounting practice. The kids grew up happy. Sophia was artistic like her mother, always drawing or making crafts, while Carl was more analytical and loved sports. By the time Sophia and Carl reached high school, I thought we'd navigated the hardest parts of marriage and parenting. We'd made it through toddler tantrums, middle school drama, and teenage attitude. Denise and I had grown closer over the years, more comfortable with each other, more like a real team. We started talking about what we'd do when the kids went to college, maybe travel more, or other things we kept pushing off. Sophia graduated from high school and went off to study art therapy at a college in another state. Carl followed, choosing a business program at a different school 4 hours in the other direction. For the first time in years, Denise and I were alone in the house together. The empty nest phase was an adjustment for both of us, especially Denise. She was used to being a mother, so much that she seemed lost without the kids needing her every day. She talked about going back to work or maybe volunteering somewhere, but she couldn't seem to decide what she wanted to do. I encouraged her to take her time figuring it out, told her we were financially stable enough that she didn't need to rush into anything. It was during this quiet period in our lives that Denise found the lump during a routine self-exam on a Tuesday morning in March. I was getting ready for work when she called me into the bathroom, her face full of worry. She guided my hand to feel what she'd found, a small but distinct mass in her right breast. We both tried to stay calm, told ourselves it was probably nothing, but we made an appointment with her doctor that same day. The next few weeks were a blur of appointments, tests, and waiting for results. I took time off work to go with her to every single appointment because I could see how scared she was, even though she tried to hide it. When the diagnosis came back as breast cancer, Denise cried for the first time in years. Not just tears, but deep, frightened sobs that broke my heart. I held her in that doctor's office and promised we'd get through it together. The treatment plan was draining, but the doctors were optimistic. Denise would need surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation, but they'd caught it early. The next 6 months were the hardest of our marriage. Denise lost her hair, lost weight, and felt sick most days from the chemo. But she was determined to beat it, and I was determined to support her through every step. I learned to cook meals that wouldn't upset her stomach, drove her to every treatment, and sat with her during the long chemo sessions. The kids came home more often, and we video called them almost every day. Denise didn't want them to worry too much, so she always put on a brave face during those calls, but I could see how much the disease was taking out of her. The surgery went well, and after months of treatment, Denise's scans showed no sign of cancer. We celebrated for the first time in months. Her hair grew back, she gained weight, and her energy returned. For almost 2 years, life felt normal again. Better than normal, actually, because we didn't take any day for granted anymore. Denise threw herself into life with this new energy. She started volunteering at a local charity that helped cancer patients and their families. She took up painting, something she'd always wanted to try. The kids were doing well in college, and everything felt like it was finally back on track. But then the cancer came back. It was Carl who noticed something was wrong during his spring break visit. He said Denise seemed tired all the time and was losing weight again. I'd been so busy with work that I hadn't paid attention to the changes, but when he pointed them out, I couldn't unsee them. Denise insisted she was fine, just tired from all her volunteer work, but I convinced her to see the doctor just to be safe. The cancer had returned and spread. The oncologist's face, when he delivered the news, told us everything we needed to know before he said the words. This time might be the last time. Denise took the news with a calmness that scared me more than tears would have. She listened to the doctor explain treatment options, asked practical questions about timing and side effects. While walking to the car, she took my hand and said we needed to tell the kids right away. The next 2 years were a slow goodbye. Denise chose to do some treatment, but not the most aggressive options available. She said she wanted to feel like herself for as long as possible, wanted to enjoy whatever time she had left instead of spending it sick from medications that might only buy her a few extra months. We made the most of that time. The kids came home more often. We took small trips when Denise felt up to it. She organized photo albums and wrote letters to Sophia and Carl for future birthdays and milestones she might miss. She planned her own funeral, which sounds weird, but actually brought her peace. She wanted to make sure everything was exactly how she wanted it. As Denise got sicker, I took more time off work to be with her. She spent more time in the hospital, first for treatments, then for pain management, and finally because she was too weak to be at home safely. The kids took turns visiting, and I was there almost every day, sleeping in the uncomfortable hospital chair next to her bed. 3 weeks before she died, the doctors told us her organs were starting to fail. They moved her to a private room and talked to us about comfort care instead of treatment. Denise was peaceful about it, more peaceful than I was. She said she'd fought as long and as hard as she could, but she was tired now and ready to rest. The final week was the hardest. The kids came home, and we took shifts sitting with her, making sure she was never alone. She'd wake up sometimes and smile when she saw one of us there. On her last day, Denise was unconscious most of the time. The doctors said her body was shutting down, and it was probably a matter of hours. Sophia and Carl had been there all morning, but went to get some food and rest. I stayed, holding Denise's hand and talking to her even though she couldn't respond. I told her about all our best memories together, our wedding day, and how beautiful she looked, the day Sophia was born, and how scared and excited we both were, Carl's first steps, and how proud she was. I told her how much I loved her, how grateful I was for 23 years of marriage, how proud I was of the children we'd raised together. Around 6 in the evening, Denise's breathing grew heavier and difficult. The nurses came in to check on her and were kind and professional, explaining what was happening and what to expect. One of them suggested I might want to call Sophia and Carl back to the hospital. I sat with Denise for another hour, watching her breathe, listening to the machines that were monitoring her vital signs. When the nurse came to check on Denise again around 7:30, she quietly told me that Denise's blood pressure was dropping and her breathing was becoming irregular. She said it wouldn't be much longer. I called Sophia and Carl, who said they were on their way back to the hospital. Around 9:30, she took her last breath. It was peaceful and quiet, exactly like she would have wanted it to be. I sat there for a while, still holding her hand, trying to process that she was really gone. 23 years of marriage, and just like that, she wasn't there anymore. The room felt empty in a way I'd never experienced before. Eventually, I realized I needed to call the nurses, let them know she passed. I also needed to call Sophia and Carl, who were probably almost to the hospital. I kissed Denise's forehead and told her I'd take care of everything, that I'd make sure Sophia and Carl were okay, that I'd never forget her. I contacted the nurse who came in, took records of everything, and left. I was still in the room, completely numb. Finally, I got up from the chair where I'd spent so many hours over the past few weeks. I needed to find the doctor, sign some paperwork, and start making the phone calls that would begin the process of telling the world that Denise was gone. I walked toward the door of Denise's room, planning to find the doctor's office. As I reached for the door handle, I could hear voices in the hallway outside. 2 nurses were talking. I paused with my hand on the door handle when I heard my name mentioned. Not my name exactly, but the husband in a tone that made me stop and listen. What I heard next changed everything I thought I knew about my life. One of the nurses was saying how sorry she felt for the husband, how I'd been there every day for weeks, so devoted to Denise. The other nurse agreed, then mentioned something about a conversation Denise had with a man the day before, when I wasn't there. Something about carrying a secret for so many years and only confessing it now when she was dying. The nurse claimed to have come in to check on my wife when she saw her talking to a man. The nurse talked about me spending my whole adult life raising another man's children and never knowing. They mentioned that the kids didn't know either, and what a mess Denise was leaving behind. My heart started beating so hard. I felt like the floor was shifting under my feet. They had to be talking about another patient, another family. There was no way they were talking about Denise, about Sophia, and Carl about me. But something in my gut told me they were. I stood frozen. After a moment, I heard footsteps moving away down the hall. I opened the door carefully and looked out. The 2 nurses were walking toward the nurses' station, but when they saw me, they both looked shocked and guilty. The older of the 2 nurses, someone I'd seen many times over the past few weeks, tried to smile at me and offered condolences for my loss. I looked at both of them, these women who'd been taking care of Denise, who'd been kind and professional through everything. They looked uncomfortable, like they wanted to be anywhere but standing there with me. I told them I'd heard them talking just now about my wife. The younger nurse immediately looked at the floor. The older one, whose name tag said Margaret, tried to maintain eye contact, but I could see the guilt written all over her face. Margaret tried to avoid the question, saying there might be some confusion, that they were just discussing patient care. But I knew they were lying to my face, and that made me angry. It was the first strong emotion I'd felt since Denise died. I said I'd heard what they said about another man's children, about secrets, and that they were clearly talking about my family. Margaret knew she had to give me answers now. Finally, Margaret suggested we sit down somewhere private, but I refused. I said after 23 years of marriage and everything we'd been through, I deserved to know the truth about what my wife had said. The younger nurse, whose name tag said Jennifer, looked up at me with fear in her eyes. She explained that Denise had been in a lot of pain the day before when I'd gone home to shower and change clothes. The medication was making her emotional, and when a male friend of hers came, she started talking about regrets, things she wished she'd done differently. When I asked what specifically Denise had said to the man, Jennifer said she wasn't there for the entire duration of the conversation, but she figured the man my wife was talking to was the father of the kids. My wife was crying and saying she should have told me years ago, but didn't know how. Jennifer continued, explaining that Denise had an affair with the man, and when she found out that she was pregnant, she wasn't sure what to do. She didn't tell the man then because she knew the man didn't want children and had already made it clear that they were never getting back together. I had my head in my hands. 23 years. 2 children I'd loved with everything I had, considered my greatest accomplishment in life. A marriage I'd thought was built on love and trust. All of it is based on a lie. I looked up at them and asked if she had heard anything else. Jennifer said no. I asked if I could see the visitor logs to know the name of this man. The other nurse offered to check for me. Margaret disappeared for a few minutes while Jennifer sat with me in the hallway. When Margaret returned, she was carrying a clipboard with sign-in sheets. She called out some names of people I immediately remember, aside from one name, Jeremy Williams, who had been there 4 times in the past 2 weeks, always during the day when I usually went home to rest. It took a while to connect the dots. Jeremy was my wife's ex-boyfriend. My whole body felt heavy and strange. I told the nurses I needed to see Denise one more time. They suggested that maybe I should wait a little while to process the information since I was clearly in shock. But I insisted I needed to see her, and they didn't try to stop me as I walked back to Denise's room. She looked exactly the same as when I'd left 30 minutes earlier, peaceful and still. But everything was different now. I looked at her face, trying to see it with new eyes, trying to understand how she could have kept such an enormous secret for our entire marriage. I thought about all the times she'd seemed distant or cold, all the moments when I felt like there was something she wasn't telling me. I had thought that's just how she was, but I never imagined she was carrying a secret this big. I thought about Sophia and Carl, probably driving to the hospital right now to say goodbye to their mother and comfort their father. They had no idea their whole understanding of their identity was about to change. They had no idea that the man who raised them, who loved them unconditionally, wasn't their biological father. They also had no idea they had a real father out there. I sat back down in the chair next to Denise's bed and looked at her one more time. I wanted to feel angry, betrayed, and furious at her for lying to me for over 2 decades. Part of me did feel those things. But mostly I just felt empty. Whatever her reasons, whatever fear or shame or love had driven her to keep the secret, she'd taken it with her. I was left to figure out how to move forward with this knowledge, how to tell Sophia and Carl, how to make sense of everything I thought I knew about my life. I heard voices in the hallway and realized Sophia and Carl had arrived. I could hear them asking the nurses about Denise. In a few minutes, they'd be in this room, expecting their father to comfort them as we mourned their mother together. But I wasn't their father. I was just the man who'd loved their mother and unknowingly raised another man's children. I stood up and walked to the door, knowing I had to face them, but having no idea what to say. How do you tell your children that everything they believe about their family is a lie? How do you explain that their dying mother confessed to a secret that changes everything? Sophia and Carl rushed toward me when they saw me in the doorway. They wrapped me in hugs. I held them both, these children I'd loved for their entire lives, and told them gently that their mother had passed away peacefully about an hour ago. We went into the room together, and they said goodbye to Denise and told her they loved her. I stood back and watched them. After we'd been there for a while, after the initial shock was gone, I knew I had to make a decision about what to tell them. Did they have a right to know the truth about their biological father? Did I have a right to keep Denise's secret even after her death? I decided to wait. They were grieving. We had a funeral to plan, and there would be time later to figure out how to handle this information. Maybe I would never tell them. Maybe some secrets were meant to stay buried. But as the days passed and we organized Denise's funeral, as I watched Sophia and Carl grieve for their mother and come to me for support, I knew I couldn't let this go. The knowledge was eating me alive, making me question every memory, every moment of happiness. 2 weeks after Denise's funeral, after Sophia and Carl had gone back to college, and I was alone in our house for the first time, I made a decision. I had to know for sure. I had to confirm what Denise had told the nurse. I went to a lab and had my DNA tested. Then I convinced Sophia and Carl to do the same, telling them I was curious about our family ancestry and wanted to create a family tree as a way of honoring Denise's memory. They agreed without any protest. The results came back 3 weeks later. Sophia and Carl were not related to me at all. 23 years of marriage. 2 children I'd thought were mine. A life I'd thought was built on love and truth. All of it was based on a lie that Denise had carried to her grave. I sat in my kitchen reading those DNA results and finally let myself feel the full weight of what I'd lost. What was I supposed to do with this information? Sophia and Carl had lost their mother. Did they deserve to lose their father, too, even if that father had never been their biological parent? Did they have a right to know the truth about their parentage, or a right to be protected from it? I still don't know the answers to those questions at that point. Denise took the truth with her to the grave, but somehow that truth found its way back to me anyway. Now I'm left to decide whether some secrets should stay buried, or whether the people I love deserve to know who they really are, even if that knowledge will hurt them. What I do know is that love isn't just about biology. Sophia and Carl are still the children I raised, the people I'm proud of, the family I choose, even if they weren't the family I thought I had. Whatever Denise's reasons for lying, whatever fear or shame drove her to keep the secret, she gave me 2 incredible kids to love. I just wish she trusted me enough to tell me the truth while she was alive. But that's not the choice I got to make. Denise made her choices, and now I have to make mine. I have to decide whether to let Sophia and Carl go on believing I'm their biological father, or whether to tell them the truth and watch their world change forever. Either way, I'll keep loving them. Because that's what fathers do, biological or not. And after 23 years, I'm still their father in every way that really matters. Even if I'm not sure I can ever forgive their mother for making me choose.